So the rise of the AI workers, what happens when work decouples from workers? So actually, Scott and Brian both spoke about this a little bit, and some of my discussions are actually a little bit of a repeat, but if you look across headlines today, every you turn, companies are saying that they're cutting jobs, and the reason being is that it's AI. Whether that's true or not, I'm not going to debate it. I think for the most part, a lot of it can be a bit of scapegoating. Companies are claiming that these tools are ready and taking over a lot of the work, but sometimes it's bad financials, sometimes it's a bit of restructuring, and they want to rebrand it. But underneath the entire spin, there is something that's happening that's fundamentally changing how we work. We are bringing in tools that can take over a lot of our tasks, that can also do a lot of the work we've used to do in the past too. And there's an introduction of AI workers that are coming in. These are tools that are autonomous. And Knowledge Lake, for instance, you do a lot of AI employees, and Parlo yesterday too, they spoke about this. But there are tools that are coming in and replacing how we've currently done work before. So the question that I have is, what happens when work no longer needs workers? When productivity is no longer tied to headcount? When your next colleague is not someone that needs to sleep, eat, take a vacation, doesn't need healthcare, and is not going to complain to HR when you make a terrible joke. For the first time, work can happen without the worker. But before I get into it, I want to say that this is not the first time this has happened before throughout human history. We have always had moments in time where we have decoupled work from our work, and it's changed our economy and society as a whole. So back in the 15th century, we used to have scribes. These were individuals that spent lifetimes copying manuscripts. They wrote everything by hand, and it was primarily universities and monasteries. And so their work was slow, it was sacred, and it was scarce. And all they did was just copy things out for entire lifetimes. But in the 1440s, the Gutenberg press came along. And for the first time, we could replicate words at speed. And so one person could be writing something, or you had a machine that was replicating and producing books at a speed that humans could never match. And suddenly there was a revolt. Companies and individuals were upset about this. They had lost their livelihoods. Monasteries feared irrelevance because their doctrine was no longer controlled by the individuals writing these things. But while this did lose a lot of jobs, it birthed new industries. We had publishing, literacy, and a new information economy came along. So that was one instance. In the 18th century, and Scott actually mentioned this too, in England, weaving was a craft. Families spun their thread, and they passed down the skills to their own generations. And then came along, in the 1760s, the spinning jenny. And all of a sudden, one machine could do the work of 8. And then after a time, it was 100 people could then do it. And this was also a massive concern for individuals doing this work, because they lost their jobs. They were pushed out of these weaving kind of environments and forced into factories. And again, revolt happened. People were scared about their jobs. They were scared about their identity because they lost it. No longer were they weavers, they were factory workers. And so they came into the factories and they smashed these machines. There was massive upheaval, and they were all scared for their roles. But this upheaval laid the foundations for mass production. We introduced factory systems, a modern economy, and even social movements like labor laws and unions all came from this. A moment in time people were scared for their roles. In the 19th, 20th century, in I think it was 1870, half of the US population worked on farms. People worked by hand, they plowed the fields, they worked with their hands and their families all together. Then came the machines. We had reapers and tractors that came along, and they replaced human labor. Now you could have one machine that could replace a dozen individuals doing the labor. And once again, we had fear. We had people that were scared for their jobs. And they came in, they smashed machines, they revolted. But out of this, people also left the fields and went to factories. They fueled industrial revolution. People left from rural environments and went to urban centers, and they fueled what we have as our modern industrial economy. This is not any different than the changes we've had in the past. But there is something fundamentally different with this revolution compared to the previous ones. In the past, we had always replaced human labor. And this time, we were replacing human cognition. So the very act of deciding, planning, interpreting, the parts of work that we thought were so uniquely human are now becoming computable. And that is the biggest fear for all of us, and it's the thing that makes it feel so destabilizing right now in our environment, is that we are losing the things that we thought were so intrinsically human. So a new hierarchy of cognitive decoupling is happening at work. And I'm going to explain this in the context of agentic AI, because I know everyone loves to talk about agentic AI. But think of it in a few different layers. So we have things like assistive agents, and you can call them anything else you want. These are not agentic in nature, but they're tools that allow you to offload some of your tasks. So things like your co-pilots are able to summarize drafts. They're supporting you. They're speeding up your work. And this is the first cognitive handoff. We're no longer having to write things down. We're no longer having to do this work. It's coming in and supporting your work. We then have knowledge agents. So think of this as AI starts to perform analytical cognition, pattern recognition, contextual comparison, predictive reasoning. So think of an ontologist that needs to kind of scan through loads of different X-rays. And now you have AI that can look through it all and then suggest what's happening as well. This is a handoff of our expertise. This is where things get a little bit scarier, because now this is acceleration of the current work we're doing. But it's still good. We're still in the loop of it. We have action agents, so the handoff of execution. So this is AI is no longer recommending. It runs claims, schedules, or approvals end to end. It's allowing you to take a hands-off approach, and this is automation of your work. AI workers is where things get a little scarier now, because this is the handoff of accountability. And a lot of companies are actually really working on this, and there's a lot of use cases, and I'll explain afterwards, where this is actually being brought in, where now full roles become autonomous. AI takes ownership of defined outcomes, recruiting, servicing, things that are very repetitive in nature, but can now be ascribed towards in an agentic tool. This is where we begin to decouple some of our existing work, and where things get a little bit concerning, and where there is more of those, where you're losing a lot of jobs for the most part. So just to kind of contextualize these different types of agents. So imagine an HR team. This HR team, this is a small one for this example, but has an HR business partner, a recruiter, and an HR generalist. The HR business partner, you would imagine, is somebody that is supporting the business. They're guiding individuals, talking to employees, but they are burdened with administration work. Rather than sitting down with people, they are sitting down and staring at their desk and filling out forms and supporting their teammates. With a lot of those lower level agents, you can now bring them in and get them to support the individuals. So an HR business partner can then have a policy advisor agent that supports them with figuring out what's kind of going on. You have employee relations agent that can then submit some surveys to the individuals in the organizations, and then gather sentiment analysis, give feedback back to the HR business partner, and they're able to now support the individuals. They can talk to humans, do those things that we talked about earlier, which is connecting with people, understanding the pain points, and driving them forward. But you can also have AI workers. And to Joel's point earlier is that we're not calling them employees, but these are producing a specific type of work. They are payroll processing. In this example, they can do the tax compliance, but they can do an entire function that existed by itself before. But there's always some level of human oversight within this. Now, this is not theoretical. This is actually happening in a lot of industries. So these are two examples. We ran a study recently with Emma AI. We did a study on where organizations are deploying these AI employees or workers in organizations. These are two examples. One's from a customer service agent. So in this one, a lending platform handling 2 million tickets a year had overwhelmed call center staff, struggling to keep up with customer queries. So they brought in an AI worker, and it stepped in to take the repetitive work. It was verifying the information, it was checking loan statuses, and it was resolving issues with escalation. And it handled about 80% of cases end to end, and it lifted satisfaction from 40 to 50% to 75, and left human agents to focus on the most complex needs. So similar to the other example before, which is, now you're taking out this, repetitive, routine work that's difficult, and you're bringing in these tools that can support you end to end and reduces the reliance on individuals. But you're giving space for humans to become more human. So when there's things that are more complex, a human steps in. You're no longer burdened by the smaller tasks and the frustrations. Similarly, there was an HR AI worker. In this example, a large services company with over 250,000 employees. HR teams was burdened with under payroll and benefits requests. It took them days to resolve these requests. So that an AI HR worker became the universal front door, instantly fielding policy and payroll questions by drawing directly from HR systems. So it was connected to all the systems in the organization, and it was able to just pull this information in seconds versus days. So this is the example I had before as well, where you have a payroll function where it's now being taken over by an entire agentic tool that's connected to your data. So this is not theoretical. These are happening, and there's a lot of more examples, and I know that some of our innovation tech showcases had similar ones too. But what does this mean for organizations and individuals? Well, for one, once AI enters the workforce, it doesn't just take on the tasks. It starts rearranging the structure around them. So we ran our study recently. It'll be coming out in a couple of weeks. But we asked 545 survey participants, what changes do you anticipate to your organization as agentic AI is implemented in the next 3 years? The top answer is it will flatten hierarchies. So we're going to see a change in your actual structure. You no longer need to have so many people, which is what we're seeing today with the stats I gave you earlier, is that companies are seeing that they're no longer needing several workers in their environments, that they can reduce it down. They're creating functional teams focused on human AI collaboration. So rather than just working siloed or with a lot of other people, you can now work with tools that support you in your job. You can be the overseer of these relationships. Reorganizing departments around AI-enabled workers. And then you have developing new reporting relationships into human AI systems. What you don't see is no significant structural changes. So the biggest point here is that there will be a structural change. These tools will change your operating model. It will change your organizational structure. It's so critical to start thinking about how it will change you today. Once the structure bends, the roles inside of it also start to bend too. So we asked the question, what changes do you anticipate to positions as agentic AI is implemented in the next 3 years as well? So once again, we have almost half of respondents expect augmenting existing roles with AI collaboration and oversight responsibilities. So no longer are you going to be actually doing the task, but you're going to be an overseer. So that's a really big skill change that requires attention to how you cultivate that and support it. There are organizations that are seeing elimination of certain positions. And I'll say as well in this study, and there's a lot more data around it, but we also captured the maturity of organizations across their agentic AI journeys. And organizations that were at the lower sense of the maturity, they were claiming that they're going to eliminate positions a lot more. They're seeing this as a way to cut costs. But organizations that were higher maturity, those that had more of their change management in place, understood their governance, had cybersecurity, everything else around maturity, actually saw it more as defining, creating new roles for them. They weren't looking to reduce their workforce, they were looking to change it. You also things like restructuring job descriptions, redefining skills. But again, 2% say no significant changes to role anticipated. So we know that we have to change the roles as we bring in more of these tools too. But here's the thing, is that with every single one of these changes, and the revolutions I discussed before, there is fear. And undoubtedly, there is massive fear here too. So 52% of employees view this as negative. They are scared. And it is scary, of course it's scary. But their number one response is that they have a fear of being replaced or devalued by agents. The second option is, overexposure of personal data, which is fair. I think it's all kind of scary how much data is actually being absorbed in how we do things. Unclear boundaries around what agents should be allowed to do. And you can kind of hear that this is a similar story to the revolutions I talked about before, where there is a lot of concern about what does this mean for me as an individual? What does it mean for my role? And will this replace me? So those signs around history just become very cyclical, where we're doing the same thing again. We are excited about this technology. We know it's going to change things, and it will undoubtedly change how we structure ourselves and the value we have in ourselves too. But it will also change the value that we have as workers too. That's something we need to address alongside this. So if we have learned anything, is that history shows that fear and resistance always come first, but adaptation follows. Every revolution begins with fear. It's around the I don't know what it will mean for me, and that's a terrifying thing to also have to realize. So I want to leave kind of with a few different things. One is, I want to give a bit of a guideline to figure out where to reskill, amplify, or replace, because we know this change is coming. So think of it on a 2x2 matrix, which is high cognitive complexity and repeatability. And you can think of this for both roles and skills themselves. So if something's cognitively complex, it means that there is a lot of thinking that the work requires. So things like judgment, creativity, understanding, the things that make us so human. Repeatability is how similar the work is every single time we do it. So if something is high cognitive complexity and low repeatability, this is something that we should consider as the zone of human advantage. This is unique, creative, and judgment-heavy work, things like being a CEO, a leader, teachers, therapists, diplomats, and research and development scientists. This is where we need to double down, invest in leadership, relationships, creative problem solving, the things that make us so human. We need to double down more than ever in these areas. Low cognitive complexity, low repeatability. So these are tasks where not as much critical thinking has to happen. There's not much repeatability there as well. This is zone of emerging AI collaboration. This is where work in AI accelerates, but humans must frame the context. Those things like financial analysts, investigative journalists, medical diagnostics, and again, think of this on both the job level and the skill level. This is where we begin to build more hybrid workflows, so train for AI literacy, orchestration, interpretation. At the bottom, you have high repeatability and high cognitive complexity. This is your zone of redesign, and this is where we as leaders need to start thinking about how should these roles and skills be shaped as well. So this is more structured work with repeatable elements where AI automates routine human and human manages edge cases, so things like project management. This is where we need to start thinking, how do we redesign these jobs? How do we break that work? And we talked about the ontological aspects as well. How do you break that work into tasks and automate what can be codified and reskill the individuals themselves? And then low cognitive complexity and high repeatability. So this is where the jobs are very codified. They're rule-based work that AI can copy end to end. This is where the AI workers start to come in. And at this moment, we can think about it in two things, which is one, you should think about exiting or reskilling these roles as well. So move people out of these roles before automation replaces them. But I don't mean get rid of them fully and fire them, but rather think about where they can bring more value in your organization somewhere else. Because we still need these individuals. It's very critical. We're not talking about full substitution, but rather, how do we advance these individuals? So this is a really simple one, and there's a lot more complexity towards all those too, of course. But hopefully this kind of gives a first indication of how to do this. And then I have advice for both employees and employers, because we're probably all both things at the same time. For employees, during this time, this decoupling of work, double down on what makes you human. And Scott talked about this, and Brian talked about this, but right now is so critical to focus on the things that bring us together: relationships, creativity, judgment, and being able to actually speak to one another. We need to do more of that right now, more than ever. Is so important. And don't wait for training and get AI literate now. There is always resistance, and those who resist are the ones that will struggle the most. It's so critical at this time to get excited about these tools. Get curious, find tools, and just test them out. Otherwise, again, those that don't try to push for their own AI literacy are the ones that will struggle the most here. Shift your mindset from replacement to redesign. Not all jobs will go away. That's very clear. But if you're going to be in the mindset that my job is disappearing tomorrow, that's a huge concern. And we should need to think about, how do I actually take control of that myself too? How do I become the master of my own destiny in this AI-driven world and get excited about it? Make curiosity your edge. That's so important in this world. Being curious is a thing that will allow you to succeed. It will allow you to keep driving to be more and drive for more as well. And for employers, Stop using AI as a blunt instrument for headcount reduction. It is not that. If you are thinking solely on reducing your headcount to save costs, you're going to be in trouble in a couple of years. It's going to be a bad time because we need to see it as more of a value generator versus a replacement tool. Redesign jobs, don't just automate tasks. This is important as well. So as we bring in more of these tools, we need to start thinking about how do we shape our jobs as well? How do we find new forms of value in what we do in terms of our work? And invest, and I said this yesterday as well, but invest in reskilling as aggressively invest in AI. I think we did a study recently as well looking at investments around agentic and Gen AI, and there's a plan to increase investments by 30 or 40% in the next year alone. That's huge. But when you ask anyone about reskilling, they always tell you that it's not their problem. But it absolutely is. If you're talking about this workforce transformation and what you want to do these tools, you have to bring your people on board too. You have to get them AI literate and excited about the technology and drive and cultivate that curiosity as well. It does not happen by itself. You have to drive that. And then lastly, build trust into adoption. We need to have trust here. This cannot happen in isolation. You need to bring people on board, share with them that their jobs will be transforming, but you're going to be guiding it with them as well. So what happens when work decouples from workers? There is no perfect answer for this because this is shaping so quickly as well. We know that this will change our work fundamentally. It will change our structures. And a lot of that will depend on the organization itself. But what we know is that the same thing will happen in every revolution. Work changes, workers change, and society must change with it. And the only difference now, and I think this is the beauty of having this event and getting to talk to people, which is we have the chance to design it with intention, and that comes from learning from one another and sharing our own stories. So I'm excited for this next phase of AI transformation and agentic era, but I would love and encourage everyone to start talking about how it changes our organizations and ourselves too. So thank you.